Song of Solomon, chapter 3, tells us very little about the wedding itself. Only a few verses describe the ceremony. The rest of the chapter is all about the wedding night and the honeymoon, which I think is further evidence that a man is the author of this text. But it's a celebration of the supernatural union of a husband and wife becoming one flesh. As we begin to read about the honeymoon, I should probably warn you that it gets a little more sexually explicit. In fact, this text had a PG-13 rating on it. No Hebrew boy was allowed to read it until he was 13 years old. But it's explicit in a different way than we would think of that word. It's not about sexual positions or sexual technique, which is often what our culture reduces sex to. Instead, what we learn about in the Song of Solomon is that being a great lover is not so much about the technique and the position, but it's more about how you express love and intimacy in marriage. We find that right from the beginning, the husband compliments his wife. So if she's standing there feeling all self-conscious and insecure, he immediately puts her at ease. We already know from chapter 1 that sometimes she can feel a little bit nervous and self-conscious about her body. And I know not all women are like that, but many women are. And so what we find is that right from the beginning, he begins to make love to his wife by using his words to tell her of her beauty and to help her see herself through his eyes. And then he goes on to compliment her eyes, which I think tells you something about where he's looking. He's looking into her eyes. Early on in marriage, my wife used to tell me that I looked at her like a piece of meat. And I think I still do this. I've just gotten better at disguising it. And I would try to talk my way out of it. I'd be like, yeah, baby, you're premium cut, prime grade. And that didn't really work. But Solomon shows us that he's not looking at his wife like she's a piece of meat on a plate. He is looking into her eyes. And then he goes on to say, your hair is like a flock of goats descending the mountain. Yeah, I'm not really sure what happened there, but it all falls apart from my perspective. Maybe he just started it, your hair is like, and wasn't sure how he was going to finish it. But actually, this is a very erotic verse, because as a Jewish woman, she would have worn her hair up in a bridal cap. And he has undone the bridal cap. Her hair has now fallen onto her shoulders. And he says, your hair is beautiful and soft, I guess like a flock of goats descending the mountain. And maybe that loses something in translation. But don't miss this. He isn't just ripping her clothes off. He is taking time to look into her eyes and taking time to compliment the beauty of her hair. Then we read in verse 2 where he compliments her smile, which tells you that they're having fun together. I'm thinking that maybe she just thought his goat metaphor was pretty funny, but she's smiling and they're having a good time. And again, what we see is that he is not just complimenting the parts of her body that are often thought of as sexual. Instead, he is looking into her eyes and complimenting her hair. He goes on, after talking about her smile, in verse 3, he describes the beauty of her lips. We continue to read as he compliments her neck. He says to her, your neck is like the Tower of David, built with elegance. And so he's not even below her neck yet. And I'm not sure a lot of husbands approach sex this way. I think we tend to revert to an animal mentality, and there's not tenderness or gentleness, there's not thoughtfulness, everything is in a hurry. But Solomon takes things slow. For him, sex is not a means to an end. This is not just a physical act. Instead, it is a connecting of souls. And so he tenderly caresses her and kisses her, and his full attention is on her. Next verse, I remember reading in junior high as I sat in church and should have been paying attention to the sermon. I didn't understand the metaphor at the time. Solomon says, your breasts are like two fawns, twins of a gazelle. At my home in Kentucky, we sometimes have deer with fawns come into our backyard. And when they show up, we approach them softly and quietly. We don't yell, "Fawns," and then tackle them. And so Solomon is describing this intimate moment where there is gentleness as he admires his wife's body. And I think this is hard for many of us today because so many men have had their minds poisoned by pornography. And they have these ideas of what their wife wants or what she will be like in bed. And instead of adding to the intimacy and adding to this trust, it has slowly destroyed it. But Solomon shows respect as he speaks to his wife. For many guys, 30 minutes into it, they would have already rolled over and gone to sleep, but he has just now undressed her.
I love you truly, truly, dear.
What seems clear as we read through this is that he is taking the lead. He is thinking of her and he's putting her needs ahead of his own. In a moment, he will touch her, and when he does, all the senses come into play. We read a lot about the senses in the Song of Solomon. The root word for sensual is senses. And so Solomon talks about this. He talks about what he sees, and he says, "You've stolen my heart with a glimpse of your eyes." He talks about what he tastes, and he says, "How much more pleasing is your love than wine?" And he talks about what he smells, and he says, "How much more pleasing is the fragrance of your perfume, more so than any spice." And so he sees her and smells her, he tastes her. In those days, women would prepare themselves for their husbands by rubbing their body down with spices and perfumes. Now, look, obviously that's not always possible, but she doesn't come to bed in her sweatpants and zit cream and say, "I suppose you want to do something tonight." No, she's thinking of him, he's thinking of her. They're putting each other's needs ahead of their own, and in doing so, they are physically demonstrating what God had in mind when he created marriage. In verse 6, he goes on to say to his wife, "Until the day breaks and the shadows flee, I will go to the mountain of myrrh and to the hill of incense." And what he's telling his wife there is, "I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here in the morning, and I'll be here the next morning and the next morning." This is one of my favorite things about being married, is every morning I wake up and the first sight I see is my wife laying there next to me. And so he's celebrating that with his wife. When he compares her body to myrrh and incense, one Jewish scholar explains that he's saying to his wife, "I can't get enough of you. And no matter how hard I try, I can't be as close to you as my heart wants to be."
Been waiting on you to come along, seeing what's on the page.
Hey,
Hey,
you're up early.
I had a dream.
Dream?
Yeah,
About what?
your new song.
My new song.
Yeah, it's good. You want to hear it? I feel like you should hear it.
Maybe later.
Did you have something else in mind?
Yeah. Something.
Me too. You know what? Something is gonna be incredible after you hear this song. Trust me, take 2 seconds.
All right.
Listen up. I've been waiting on you to come along, seeing notes on a page, but not the song. Had a hole in my heart, a pain so strong. Only a woman like you could take me on. There's a plan for us, a hand divine. The waiting was worth it. Now you're my wife. We've been taking our time, doing this right. Tonight I'm not gonna just kiss you goodnight.
entire book of Song of Solomon, there's only one verse that is traditionally thought to be the voice of God. It comes in chapter 5 at the end of verse 1. It's after the couple has made love, and God says, "Eat, O friends, drink and enjoy, O lovers." In other words, God says, do it again. You see, it is his gift, and as the giver of the gift, he rejoices when it's enjoyed. And so now Solomon and his wife lie in bed, no longer two, but united by God as one.
Touch of your skin.